My name is Ruby Carson. I'm 31 years old and currently living and working in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If there's one thing I understand better than most, it's what it feels like to be treated as the last option by your own family. Even when you're the only one always carrying the weight, staying quiet, and making sacrifices. Since I was a child, I learned not to ask for too much. My younger sister, Lily, 2 years younger than me, never had to ask for anything. Everything was simply laid out for her. My birthdays were usually just a quiet dinner with a store-bought cake from the local grocery store. No candles, no friends, not even a handwritten card. Meanwhile, Lily's birthdays were major productions. Printed invitations, inflatable castles in the backyard, three-tier cakes topped with her favorite cartoon characters, and a crowd of friends our parents called a well-deserved celebration for a little princess. I still remember being 10 and asking if I could have a sleepover with a few girls from class. My mother said, "No, Ruby, your dad works hard all week. Don't mess up the house with silly kid stuff." 2 months later, Lily was taken to a kids' spa with her friends, complete with an at-home hairstylist. My mother's only comment to me, "She needs encouragement. She's shy. You're stronger than she is. You don't need those things." Those words sank deeper into me than any punishment ever could. My father, Neil Carson, was a high school math teacher. My mother, Elaine, used to be a nurse before she quit to stay home with Lily when she turned 6. I don't blame them for working hard. I blame them for never once stopping to ask, "How are you feeling, Ruby?" I was a straight-A student all 4 years of high school, competed in debate, worked at the library. When I got a full scholarship to the University of Minnesota, my mother simply nodded and said, "Good, that saves us a lot on tuition. No hug, no photo on move-in day." Lily, though, she once improved from a C to a B in history, and the family treated it like she had gotten into Harvard. "She needs encouragement to not get discouraged," my mother would explain. I'd just sit there, forcing a smile, swallowing that ache of being overlooked down into the pit of my stomach. Even as a kid, I recognized the unspoken family order. I was the responsible one, the fallback. And Lily, she was the heart of the family. The one protected, spoiled, and never expected to do anything hard. I once tried to say it out loud, one evening while my parents were watching TV and Lily was allowed to use the iPad late. "Mom, why do you always favor Lily?" She didn't turn around. Her voice was cold. "What nonsense are you saying, Ruby? I love you both the same, but Lily's more fragile than you. You're her big sister. You should understand." I said nothing. "You should understand" was a sentence I had heard too often, like an invisible shackle that had been around my neck my entire childhood. So I learned to stay silent, to endure, to disappear from view. And in that silence, I made a quiet promise to myself. One day, I would build a life where my worth wasn't traded for my rank in a family that had already decided who mattered more. I just didn't know the price of keeping that promise would be so high. I never thought I'd return to the house on Pine Hollow Drive, the place where I grew up with more wounds than warm memories. But life has a strange way of circling back, especially when you think you've finally escaped. At 29, I had a stable life in a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Minneapolis. I was leading a marketing team at an e-commerce firm, earning enough for a comfortable lifestyle, driving an old but reliable car, and had a clear 2-year plan to save up for a down payment on my own place. Then my mother called. Her voice trembled as she mentioned the refinanced mortgage. They were 3 months behind on payments. Without urgent help, the bank would begin foreclosure. "This house belonged to your grandparents," she said. "If we lose it, we don't know where we'll go." I asked, "What about Lily?" She hesitated, then said, "She just left her job. She's going through a tough time." I didn't ask any more questions. That house wasn't just a 3-bedroom brick structure. It was a system where I had learned how to endure, how to be sidelined. But no matter how bitter it felt, it was still the place I was born. I remembered my grandfather rocking on the front porch, his shaky hands pouring tea for my grandmother each morning. I didn't want the bank to seize that house and sell it off, just because Lily and my mother couldn't manage money. Then I heard myself say it, like someone else was speaking for me. Okay, I'll help. I'll cover the mortgage until things settle down. My parents cried. I didn't. 6 months in, I had canceled all my annual trips, picked up weekend freelance gigs, and postponed buying a home. The small apartment I rented wasn't much, but it was the first space that was truly mine, from the cactus on the balcony to the caramel leather chair I custom ordered. I had planned to upgrade to a place with a home office. Instead, that savings went to Citizens Trust and mortgage into an account under Elaine Carson, my mother's name. $3,900 a month. With insurance and property taxes, it came close to $4,500. I didn't live in that house. I was just the person sending payments on time. Every Sunday, I still visited, like muscle memories steeped in cinnamon from our kitchen growing up. My dad would smile, ask about work, then shift the conversation to Lily's plan to open a bakery or healing through yoga classes. Mom would always ask the same thing. Anyone special in your life lately? No one ever asked, are you tired? Sometimes I'd ask myself why I kept doing it. Maybe it was the old fear that saying no would mean I wasn't the good one anymore. Or maybe, deep down, I still hoped they'd finally see I was worthy of love without a price tag. Around the 12th month, I started noticing things. Every time I visited, Lily was home. When I asked, Mom would smile and say she needs space to figure things out. I started noticing the details. Lily had a room on the main floor. Jeremy's, her fiance's, car was regularly in the driveway, and one evening, I spotted an Amazon package addressed to him. I didn't ask. I told myself as long as everyone's peaceful, I can live with it, but the longer I watched, the clearer it became. Their peace didn't include me. One late night, while finishing a report, I got a message from the bank. It said the linked address for account notices had been updated. I hadn't made any changes. I called customer service, and after a round of verification, the rep said someone had recently requested that all notices be sent to Lily's address. I sat up straight, my heart thudded. I was paying the mortgage. But now the bills were being redirected to Lily? Before I could call, a message from my mother popped up. No greeting, just cold words. Ruby, don't come by the house this week. We need time to reflect on everything. The next line froze me. We've changed all the locks in the gate code. I sat there, motionless. The screen's light felt like a slap across my face. In that moment, I realized the house I had fought to save, with money, patience, and silence, was never really mine. And what I had just lost wasn't just a house. I didn't call back, didn't text, didn't drive past the house with the white iron gate I used to ride my bike through every afternoon after school. I just sat on a kitchen stool in my rented apartment, staring at my mother's final message like it had been carved into stone. We've changed the locks and the gate code. Short, no explanation, no hesitation, a clean cut. I wasn't even sure what hurt more, their coldness or the fact that I wasn't surprised. 3 days later, I got a call from the bank. A loan officer said they needed to verify the identity of the person managing the mortgage because they had received a request to update the account information. I asked, who was added to the file? There was a slight pause before she replied, Jeremy Lang. My heart slammed against my ribs. Jeremy, Lily's fiancé, the guy with no money, the one who once borrowed a few $100s from me to start a cold brew brand, and then disappeared for 3 months. I hung up, opened my laptop, logged into my mortgage account, and checked the auto-pay settings I had quietly maintained each month like a loyal machine. Everything looked intact, until I clicked on Associated Contacts. Below Elaine Carson, my mother's name was a new entry added 2 weeks earlier, co-manager of the account. Lily. I wasn't listed anywhere. That night, I sent an email demanding the bank revoke access for anyone besides myself. I attached bank statements, a 2-year payment history, and email threads proving I had been the only one making the payments on the house. The next morning, a text came from an unknown number. Don't be petty, Ruby. You still have a job, your own place. Lily is just starting over. The family needs stability. Don't ruin this. No signature, But the tone, equal parts smug and groveling, could only be Jeremy. I took a deep breath. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. They hadn't just changed the locks. They hadn't just shut me out. They had been planning to replace me. I replayed the moments, Lily showing up more often on Sundays, the sideways glances between my parents when I asked about the future of the house, the vague reassurances like, "You've got more opportunities and Lily needs a foundation to rebuild." They'd been preparing for this, step by step. From the moment I started covering the mortgage, they'd been paving the way for Lily and Jeremy to take over. And me, I had been nothing more than the financial conduit. My dad had said something months ago over dinner that I'd brushed off at the time. If we still have this house, it'll be thanks to Lily being able to settle there long term. Now I understood. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource. That day, I printed out every mortgage payment receipt from the last 24 months, screenshotted every relevant message, archived every email. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the boundary I was building. I also called the company's former legal consultant, the one who had helped me handle a minor property dispute last year. I explained the situation. She asked just one question. "Whose name is on the deed?" I answered, "My parents." She paused for a moment, then said plainly, "Legally, you don't have a claim, but if you can prove you made the payments with the expectation of reimbursement or future ownership, this can fall under financial exploitation." I thanked her and hung up. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the little girl hiding in the living room while her parents scolded Lily. I was 31-year-old Ruby, holding the full weight of truth in my hands. And the fire inside me, no longer a scream, burned slow and steady like coals that refused to die. I had planned to cut ties after the lock change message, but then Dad called and left a shaky voicemail. "Ruby, it was just a misunderstanding. Your mom, she overreacted. Can you come home for dinner this weekend? We'll talk it through. We're still a family, right?" I hesitated. Then I agreed, not because I trusted them, but because I needed to hear them say out loud what I had known all along, but they never dared admit. Sunday evening, I returned to the house on Pine Hollow Drive. It was lightly snowing. The Christmas lights from last year still dangled unfinished along the roof, like someone had forgotten to take them down out of fatigue or apathy. Mama opened the door with a forced smile. "Come in, sweetie, I made your favorite roast." In the kitchen, Lily and Jeremy were already there. They sat together at the head of the table like it had become their rightful place. My father was pouring wine into their glasses, looking like a proud host welcoming some esteemed couple. I took a seat. No one mentioned the lock change. No one apologized. No one brought up the over $100,000 I had wired over the past 2 years. Everything was wrapped in a smooth, practiced silence. Dinner began with boring chatter about Jeremy's new job, online personal brand consulting. Lily talked about how she was learning meditation. My father nodded approvingly. My mother added occasional praise. Lily is really turning her life around. I set my knife down. They didn't invite me to talk. They invited me to witness. Then Dad set his wine glass down and cleared his throat. "Ruby, there's something your mother and I wanted to make clear." I stayed quiet. Mom gently touched Lily's hand, like a signal. "After much thought, we've decided that Lily and Jeremy should officially move into the house for good. They need stability, and this house was always meant for Lily." I looked up. "Meant for Lily? What about the mortgage payments I've made?" My mother avoided my eyes. "You're doing well. You have a career, your own place, a car. Lily, she needs a fresh start, and you don't really need this house." Jeremy jumped in. "We're willing to help with maintenance from now on, so Ruby won't have to carry the burden." I gave a cold smile. "So now I'm allowed to stop paying?" Dan responded, trying to keep his tone calm. "Ruby, don't make this dramatic. This decision is about the bigger picture. Lily has always been emotionally tied to this house. She has more memories here than you." I said flatly. And me? What am I? A placeholder? A wallet? Holding space until you found a more deserving child? Silence fell. Jeremy cleared his throat, trying to lighten the mood. We're all family. This is just a small shift. Lily looked up, her voice sharp. Ruby, you always act so noble. Do you want us to be in your debt forever just because you paid some bills? This is a family, not a company with credits and debits. I turned to Mom. Did you ever intend to put my name on the deed? She bit her lip. Didn't answer. She didn't need to. I knew. I stood, slowly, calmly. No rage. Fine. If you've decided who's worthy, then my part in this family is done. Mom called out. Ruby, don't escalate this. Do you know what people will think? I looked her in the eyes. They'll think I'm the fool who paid over $100,000 only to get kicked out of the very house I saved. I walked out with steady steps. There was no anger left in me, just a final understanding I had never truly been part of this family. 3 days after that dinner, I received a text from my mom at 7 a.m., just as I was brewing coffee before heading out. No greeting, no check-in, just one blunt sentence. We've changed all the locks and gate codes. You are no longer allowed to return. Lily doesn't feel safe knowing you still drive by. My hand froze on the cup handle. Steam from the machine brushed my cheek, hot and sharp. I hadn't driven by. In fact, I had deliberately avoided that street since the night they declared the house was meant for Lily. I sat down, phone in hand, rereading the message. Short. Cold. Certain. As if I hadn't poured over $110,000 into that house and sacrificed 2 full years of my life plan. As if I were a threat. I didn't reply, but I took a screenshot. 15 minutes later, I called Chloe, my best friend from college, now a civil attorney in St. Paul. They changed the locks on the house I've been paying the mortgage for, Chloe, and they're making up some story about me threatening Lily just to kick me out. She paused, then asked directly, Whose name is on the title? My parents, not mine. Did they ever promise to add yours? Not in writing, just verbal assurances. And 2 years of wire transfers. Then we need documents, statements, texts, emails, anything that proves the payments weren't gifts. I hung up. What I felt wasn't just hurt, it was a chilling clarity. They weren't hiding it anymore. The mask had fallen. They had chosen Lily. They had chosen to erase me. That day, I emailed the bank and instructed them to halt all payments related to the mortgage on the Pine Hollow Drive property. In the reasons section, I wrote, I no longer have access to this property and hold no legal rights of ownership. I canceled my weekend side gigs, spent 3 days compiling every piece of evidence. Bank statements, transaction histories, message logs, screenshots. I printed them all out. The folder thickened like an indictment of coordinated betrayal. On the 4th day, I got a message from an unknown number. Are you really going to let the bank seize the house? Lily is panicking. She hasn't been able to sleep. You're being cruel. No signature. But I knew it was Jeremy. I laughed out loud. Of course. They thought I'd cave like always. They still believed I was the daughter who'd drain her savings just because someone said the family needs you. That evening, I received 3 calls from Dad, 1 missed call from Mom, a voicemail from Lily, her voice choked, but not a hint of apology. You're destroying everything, Ruby. I don't understand why you always need to tally up your sacrifices. Family is about love, not bookkeeping. If you wanted to prove you were right, congrats. You won. We lost everything. I deleted it. No save, no response. That night, for the first time in years, I slept through without waking once. The next morning, I received a notice from the bank. The mortgage was officially delinquent. If unpaid within 2 weeks, foreclosure proceedings would begin. I forwarded the email to Chloe. She replied with just 3 words. Absolutely perfect. Attached was a calendar invite, an appointment with a real estate attorney and an independent financial advisor. On the 7th day since I stopped paying the mortgage, the cracks in the family began to show. The first call came in at 8 a.m. from my dad's number. I let it ring through to voicemail. A few minutes later, a voice message appeared. "Ruby, it's Dad. The bank sent a warning notice. They said if we don't pay within 10 more days, they'll escalate the file to their legal department. We need to talk right away." Not a single apology. No mention of the lock change. Just the bank and we. Strange. When they kicked me out of that house, no one said we. I forwarded the voice recording to Chloe. She replied simply, "Keep silent. No one has the right to demand anything from you at this point." An hour later, my mom sent a long email, not a text like she usually did. Maybe she thought a formal letter would seem more sincere or persuasive. "I know you're angry, Ruby, but I hope you don't let emotion override reason. This house isn't just bricks and shingles. It's memories, a home. You used to love it, remember? Losing it to the bank would leave us with nothing. I'm begging you, don't let your grandparents' house fall into strangers' hands. Family is meant to lift each other up, not punish. Please call me." I read it carefully. Twice, familiar wording. The same old strategy, lean on nostalgia, trigger guilt, and invoke family. Yet not a single line acknowledging I'd paid over $110,000 and was then locked out like a stranger. I didn't reply. By afternoon, Jeremy sent a message, this time a short video clip. It showed Lily sitting at the kitchen table, head buried in her arms, crying. His voice came from behind the camera. "Ruby, look at your sister. She hasn't eaten in 3 days. She can't sleep knowing the house is on the edge. If you have any heart left, you won't let everything fall apart like this." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then hit delete. No save, no forwarding. That night, I received 5 more messages from aunts, uncles, and relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Most said something like, "You should be more forgiving. Your parents are getting old." One went straight to the point. "Who cuts off their family over money?" I smiled. Money? What I cut off wasn't money. It was manipulation. A relationship that only functioned as long as I kept pulling out my wallet. The next day, I met with a financial advisor. An older man with salt and pepper hair looked over my statements and nodded. "If you maintain your current saving rate in 6 to 8 months, you'll have enough for a new apartment down payment. And the amount you contributed to that other house, if invested wisely, could fund an early retirement account." I stared at the numbers on the screen, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. For the first time in years, my money was mine. Not quietly siphoned off, not taken for granted as something of course Ruby would do. That evening, I returned home and pulled an old box from under the bed. Inside was a notebook with a note from my grandfather. He once taught me a phrase when I was little. "Kindness is not an obligation. Don't let anyone make you believe that love should only flow in one direction." I gently flipped the page, then closed the book. Monday morning, while I was in a marketing meeting about a new campaign, I received an email from a strange address. mark.caldwell@thompsonlegalgroup.com. The subject line was simple, request for cooperation regarding the real estate loan on Pine Hollow Drive. I opened it. The message was an invitation from Mark Caldwell, an attorney representing my parents. He was, on behalf of the clients, inviting me to attend a working session at their office on Friday to jointly discuss solutions to preserve the shared property and resolve the current financial situation. At the end, one sentence was bold. "If she does not attend, Ms. Ruby Carson will be understood to have forfeited her right to discussion and may face subsequent legal consequences." I chuckled softly. On one hand, an urgent plea via email. On the other, a threat wrapped in the phrase legal consequence, very consistent with how they raised Lily, hugging while squeezing. That night, I replied, copying in my personal attorney, Linda McAllister, a civil law and family asset dispute specialist. I confirmed attendance but requested the meeting be fully recorded with both sides' attorneys present and all content formally documented. 3 days later, I stepped into the 14th floor conference room of the Edina office tower with a leather briefcase filled with records. Linda walked beside me. calm, razor-sharp in a charcoal suit. Across the table, my parents sat close together, visibly drained but trying to look dignified. Lily had her arms crossed, visibly guarded. Jeremy avoided my gaze the moment our eyes met. Attorney Mark began. We believe everyone in this room wants to save the house from foreclosure. We hope Ms. Ruby will cooperate to find a fair solution. I said nothing. Linda gently pushed a file across the table. This is my client's bank statement showing she paid the entire mortgage for 24 consecutive months, totaling over $110,000. She also holds written messages and emails from Mr. and Mrs. Carson confirming the support was temporary, not a gift. I spoke, voice steady. I don't own the house. I wasn't allowed to live in it. I was locked out by a cold text message. And now, you want me to keep paying? My father furrowed his brows but said nothing. My mother's hands trembled slightly. Mark cut in. I understand Ms. Ruby's feelings, but legally, the house remains in her parents' name. If it's foreclosed, the consequences... Linda interrupted. Ms. Ruby has no legal obligation here. If you intend to proceed with legal action, we're prepared, including filing a claim for systemic financial exploitation within the family structure. The air turned heavy. I looked directly at my father. You once said, just help us now, and when things stabilize, we'll sit down and divide the assets fairly. Was that a promise or just a way to buy time? He stayed silent. I turned to my mother. You once texted, the house is your grandparents' legacy to both you girls. Then why did you tell Lily she deserves it more? Because I didn't cry or beg like she did? Lily slammed her hand on the table. You always make yourself the victim. You have a job, money, a boyfriend. What do I have? I just want a place to start over. But you always want me to fall flat. I leaned back. Didn't respond. Linda calmly packed the documents. Unfortunately, my client will not continue any further payments. If you want to save the house, do what responsible adults do, pay your own debts. We've recorded this meeting. Everything is now clear. I stood, buttoned my coat. Starting today, I'm no longer this family's backup wallet. You can keep thinking you're right, but the bank doesn't work with emotions. It works with numbers. Linda and I stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind us. Inside, I could hear my mother burst into tears. But I didn't turn back, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved and free. 2 weeks after the tense meeting with my family, I got an email from the bank confirming. The foreclosure file had officially entered enforcement. But the house on Pine Hollow Drive, the one I'd poured my youth and over $110,000 into, was now legally no longer my concern. That night, I sat in the small kitchen of Aaron, my boyfriend of over a year, watching him slice red bell peppers for tacos. The soft yellow light made everything feel a little lighter. I exhaled and said quietly, I don't want to live among cardboard boxes and constant caution anymore. He looked up. So, you're thinking of moving in? I nodded. Not because I needed shelter, but because I wanted to choose where I lived and who I lived with on my own terms. 2 weeks later, I left my old rental apartment, the place that had once been a hideout after hundreds of emotionally draining family dinners. Now, I didn't need a place to hide. I needed a place to begin. Aaron owned a 2-bedroom attic apartment northeast full of sunlight, close to a park with a balcony big enough for a few lavender pots. I unpacked only the things that truly belonged to me. The draft of a marketing project I was developing. A photo of me alone in Iceland. An amber-glazed ceramic mug I picked up at a flea market in Duluth. That first week living together, Aaron cooked every night, not because I needed it, but because, in his words, he wanted me to feel cared for with no strings attached. He said that often. Meanwhile, family news came in bits and pieces. Through friends, I heard Lily and Jeremy had moved in with an old friend in St. Cloud after receiving the final foreclosure notice. My mom tried to delay the enforcement, but lacked the documents to prove a stable income. They no longer qualified to buy back the home they'd lived in for 30 years. I didn't feel triumphant, but I also didn't feel crushed like before. It was something else, like truth, eventually, always finds its rightful place. On a Saturday near the start of spring, my mother sent a short message. I understand if you don't reply, but I've been listening to that podcast you did on financial independence for women. You spoke beautifully. I want to say sorry, if I'm allowed to. I read it over and over. It didn't beg, it didn't blame, it didn't justify. I didn't respond immediately. A week later, I invited her for coffee. At a small cafe near Lake Harriet, neutral ground, unburdened by old memories. She showed up in a thick coat, eyes tired but honest. No tears, no hugging. We sat across from each other, a latte between us acting like a needed buffer. I'm not here to ask for money. I'm not hoping you'll be our rescue plan anymore. She took a breath. I know I did so many things wrong. I nodded, staying silent. I used to think that because you were the strong one, you'd always stick around. But I was wrong. You didn't just leave, you let go, and held on to your worth. I looked her in the eye. I don't want to cut you out of my life, but if you want to be part of it, things will have to change. No more, you're the older one, you should understand. No more, you can handle it. No more, just help a little. I don't live that way anymore. She nodded, eyes red. I understand. I really do now. We didn't solve everything in that one cup of coffee, but for the first time in years, I felt like we had a real conversation. No pressure, no pretending nothing happened. Later that month, I got promoted, Director of Content Strategy. During the announcement meeting, my boss looked at me and said, "We need someone who's not only skilled, but knows they belong at the decision-making table. Ruby, you're that person." I stepped out into the hallway, golden sunlight pouring through the glass. Erin texted, "Congrats, you're officially running your own game now." I smiled. No longer the one who endures. No longer the invisible shadow behind every "the family needs you" call. I'm Ruby Carson, and from now on, my life is mine, defined by the boundaries I set and the freedom I claimed. Ruby's story is a powerful reminder that kindness is not an obligation, and sacrifice doesn't always mean love. In real life, some families only show love as long as you're useful. When Ruby set firm boundaries, she didn't just reclaim her financial power. She broke a pattern of manipulation that had lasted for years. True freedom doesn't come from acceptance. It comes from choosing to walk away and live life on your own terms. What do you think of Ruby's decision? Would you have done the same if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional family stories and life-changing lessons.